He's a man well known in our community, overwhelmingly re-elected to represent Louisiana in Washington, D.C., with a resounding 80% of the vote. Congressman Garret Graves. One of the key battles this congressman has taken on is the repeal of the Windfall Elimination Provision and government pension offset. While these issues may not affect everyone, they hit hard for many, including firefighters, police officers, and teachers who are not receiving the Social Security benefits they earned before taking the government jobs. Congressman Graves explains the current status of his bill and how close we are to seeing these policies finally repealed. We will also get an update on Baton Rouge's traffic nightmare, including the much-anticipated Comite Diversion Canal, a project many have been hearing about their entire lives. What's the latest progress? And after that, Graves has made the surprising decision not to seek re-election, largely due to the changes in redistricting that split Baton Rouge among multiple representatives. All that, plus what's next for a man who has spent his life serving the people. We're diving into it all for this episode of Louisiana Unfiltered. Welcome back, everyone. This week we are joined by Congressman Garret Graves. I don't think I've ever hidden this fact that you have done so much for the community. And I think one of my favorite things about you has been that no matter when somebody calls you, day or night, you're always answering the phone. But then I remember trying to figure out, I have a problem with this. I can't keep up with all the tips that come in. You have an odd filing system that you're able to keep up with every tip. So if somebody stops you in a grocery store, you know exactly what they're talking about.
Well, there's a lot going on, but one of the things is, look, you live in the community. You go to the grocery store. You go take the kids and go buy clothes or whatever it is. I mean, you're experiencing all these things yourself, and you're immersing yourself in the community. And look, one of the things that we did before just about any other member of Congress is that we use social media as a way to engage people in these, live sessions and virtual town hall meetings and things like that. And you are so immersed and exposed in the pulse and what is happening in all of the parishes that you represent that you really can't not know what is going on. It's not even an option because you're facing these people, you're being held accountable to these people, you're engaging people on a daily basis. And so, I think we do have a really unique way and do a good job of keeping on top of things that are going on in the district and what the needs are, which has helped us to identify the priorities in the community and help to deliver on those.
And two of your biggest things of all the things that you have worked on is WEP, GPO, and of course the whole Comite River project. And we're going to get to all of that as well. But first, I want you to introduce yourself to people as if they have no idea who you are.
Sure.
Who are you? How did you get to D.C.?
Yeah. So Garret Graves, I represent about a dozen parishes in the United States House of Representatives. We took office in January of 2015. Before that, was responsible for doing negotiations and a lot of the response activities on the BP oil spill, responsible for rebuilding levees and restoring coastal wetlands after Hurricane Katrina. Did a lot of policy work and consulting in energy, environment, infrastructure, defense issues, and spent a lot of time in that space. And before that, was a wilderness guide and a river guide on whitewater. But look, I never planned to run for office, but jumped in and crowded field won, and it's been an amazing opportunity. And I want to be clear, we haven't batted 1,000. We're very far from perfect, but this has just been an incredible opportunity because look, just about everybody in the public's frustrated about something, right? And one of the things we just experienced is the frustration with traffic. But there are really only a handful of people that can fix problems like that. And so, just being in a position where you really can work to bring solutions to your frustrations and to the frustrations of the community is really just it's an awesome opportunity if you properly do the job. And so, you mentioned some of these self-security things, you mentioned the Comite project, and look, I mentioned traffic. Those are just three examples of areas where we have brought unprecedented solutions to the table. Still have a long way to go, but unprecedented solutions to the table. But let me say it again. Being in a position like this where you don't just identify problems and maybe express frustration with them, but being in a position where you can actually help, it's such a neat opportunity to be able to do that and help solve problems for the community.
Well, and before we get to all of that, so talk to me about redistricting and how your time for now is soon to come to an end.
Yeah. So this is going to be the last year that we serve, which, look, 10 years. I mean, my gosh, serving effectively on the board of directors for the United States of America. Like, what an amazing, awesome opportunity. And, I'll say it again. We haven't gotten every single thing done that we wanted to, but we have batted well above the average, and not just my statistics. All sorts of studies show that our office has outperformed, overperformed. But yeah, with new maps that were drawn by the legislature earlier this year, it really throws a pretty big curveball or monkey wrench in that it creates one district that goes from Bogalusa to Hammond to Denham Springs to Baton Rouge to Monroe. It has another district that goes, which I love this, somebody named it the seatbelt district because it looks like a seatbelt across the state, but it goes from Shreveport all the way down to the Baton Rouge area and right up against Prairieville. And I mean, these maps don't make sense. They don't pass the LAF unfortunately, or the rationale test. And it just, after looking at things, we just decided that it just doesn't make sense to run. It just doesn't. It doesn't feel right. I do think the maps are going to get thrown out because if they don't pass a LAF test, they're not going to pass a legal test either. And so I think they'll get thrown out for 2026, and which is important because this capital region where we are right now, it is the most populated, for example, East Baton Rouge is the most populated parish in the state, but it's effectively split up in 4 of the 6 congressional districts. And what it does for this whole capital region, for the whole region, for EBR, for Livingston, Ascension, and the adjacent parishes, is it really dilutes the voice of this area. I mean, this is really one of the most important areas, the most concentrated populations, and the fact that it's been split up into 4 districts, what it does is it gives more power to New Orleans, it gives more power and more voice to other areas, and really dilutes the voice of the people in this region. And knowing that we have things like a new bridge that's not going to be cheap and not going to be easy to do, crossing the Mississippi River is one of our top priorities. There's not going to be a person that will be, sort of grabbing the baton on that one, and that can be held accountable to delivering on that. It just really is unfortunate what has been done.
But if you look at the new congressional maps, how difficult is it going to be for somebody when you have a place spanning from Bogalusa all the way to Monroe?
Yeah, it's a great and insightful question because, what do you prioritize if you represent Bogalusa, Hammond, Denham, Baton Rouge, all the way up, hugging that Mississippi border up to Monroe? What do you prioritize? You have areas that are more rural and have poverty issues, that have education issues. You have areas that are more urban, that have transportation, that probably have flooding issues. You could go through the whole gamut. It's not just about, what are your top 5 priorities in this district? It's also things that are a little bit more inside baseball. What committee do I get on in Congress? In the House of Representatives, committees is where the business is done. And, in this district where we are right now, being on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and being on the Natural Resources Committee, it's such a natural fit to this district. You got the energy, the fisheries, you got the shipbuilding, you've got the Corps of Engineers and FEMA issues, you've got things like roads and bridges and airports. I mean, all of that, those are so wheelhouse for this district. But it's just not fair. It's not fair to the constituents, the people that live there, and it's honestly, it's not fair to the member of Congress. This comes from, look, I've been there, I've worked there. It's not fair to put somebody in a situation where you have such disparate populations, such disparate needs, geographical areas. You can't well represent these districts the way that they're drawn. You can't identify the top 5 priorities because they're going to be all over the map. And I'll say it again. It's a disservice. It's unjust to both the members of Congress that are ultimately going to get elected and to the people, the citizens that live in these areas, because their priorities can't be addressed with as drawn out and random as these districts are.
And that was a part of your decision not to run because you did not know what committee to even try to serve, correct?
It is. It was a big part of our decision because I don't think that we could have maintained the same standard of representation that we've been able to achieve after successes and failures and kind of perfecting our model and our team over the last 10 years or 9 years. I don't think we could have maintained that standard. But look, and I honestly don't think anyone can. And it's really unfortunate what's happened over the last year. It's unfortunate because, look, Louisiana's got some incredible needs, and we need somebody who can be in a position of actually delivering results. If we had stayed and been elected in January, I think we would be the chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which isn't just on the key committee, but you're actually the one calling the shots. You're the one holding the pen, writing the bills. And so that's full jurisdiction over Corps of Engineers and coastal restoration, Corps of Engineers and flood control, like Comite Project, Corps of Engineers and hurricane protection, like West Shore and Morganza to the Gulf, critical hurricane protection projects, over Mississippi River Bridge, over FEMA and fixing this disaster response and recovery model. I mean, just all over pipelines, over economic development, all these things that are so important to South Louisiana. And it really, it's unfortunate the way this has gone down. But look, it is what it is. And let me go back to how it started. Kiran, I can't look back at these 10 years. While certainly, some errors, some lessons learned, but I can't look back at these 10 years and have anything other than a net positive thought and just what an honor it's been and just some of the awesome wins that we've been able to work together with local and state officials and get things done that have just been literally unprecedented. And so that's exciting to be able to look back and say, no, we made some mistakes, but net, this was a huge win and just a huge positive experience for me.
Well, and let's start there. I feel from the days at my former employer, one of the stories that we've covered intensely with you is WEP and GPO. In fact,
you like those acronyms, don't you?
I do, because in my head I'm like, what do they stand for again? So I'm going to let you talk about that. But Windfall Elimination Provision.
Look at that, nailed it, yeah.
GPO, we'll let you take that one.
It's the government printing office, is that right? GPO is the government pension offset.
Yes.
So look, the quick story and just a really good way to explain this is, let's say that you and I were both security guards and we worked for a private company as security guards and we got paid the same amount. We worked for the same period of time. And then after 20 years, you and I both said, you know what, we're going to tap out. And I decided that I'm going to go back and I'm going to just go help family and raise kids. And you said, you know what, I like this security and law enforcement thing. I'm going to go be a Baton Rouge Police Department or Denham Springs Police Department or a sheriff's deputy or what have you. And you went into law enforcement. And you did that for another 10 years. Now, Kiran, despite the fact that we each worked in the private sector and paid the exact same amount of money into the Social Security Trust Fund over the same dates, when each of us go to retire, my Social Security benefits may be $1,600 a month. Yours, despite that you paid the same amount to Social Security, yours may be $600. And so this is literally a stealing, an embezzling, a redirecting of your money.
By the government.
By the government, somebody we're supposed to trust. Now, if I was a private company and I were doing that with your retirement fund, I would go to jail for that, and I should. But people in Washington feel that, this is just budgeting, but it is still stealing. And you can look back because they made this change in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They have stolen tens of billions of dollars. And so what happens, the people that are most impacted, the millions and millions of people across this country that are impacted by this, but some of the most impacted careers, occupations are people like teachers. I mean, these are the folks that are leading, guiding, and shaping the next generation. These are critical jobs, and they're already underpaid. People like police officers that literally put their lives on the line every single day for the security of our community. And let me just pause on those too. Because Kiran, some of the things that I hear, you heard me talk about top 5 a couple of times. Some of the things that I hear from the community, people are concerned about education. They're concerned about the education this next generation is getting. We need the best and the brightest teaching school. This doesn't need to be the people that can't get other jobs. And so if you're going to disincentivize or penalize people for choosing to be teachers by cutting their retirement or not treating them fairly, treating them equally to other people, then why would you go into that profession? Similarly, I hear people all the time talk about safety and security in their community, concerned about the rule of law and enforcement. And if once again, if we're going to disincentivize good people from getting into law enforcement, already a job where folks are underpaid, where folks are overworked, where folks are literally putting their lives on the line, then we're not going to end up with the caliber of law enforcement that we need. And what that means is we're not going to be able to maximize the potential of our kids with the teacher scenario, and we're not going to have the community, the safe community that we deserve to raise a family.
And the thought process is they get a pension, correct? And that's why it's okay to pretty much, even though they put in 100% into Social Security, it's okay to rob those people.
So we won't go back and talk about history all the way back to before I was born, but the deal is that there were some changes that were made in the law in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and there was a belief that, and I think it was an accurate depiction that in some cases people were getting double paid, sort of in retirement, and that they were getting credit for Social Security for years they didn't pay into the system. And so that is something that, I think you need to revisit that. People
Agreed.
Shouldn't be paid for years they didn't pay into the Social Security system. But when they fixed it, they did a massive overcorrection. And you literally have stolen tens of billions of dollars from some of these retirees, and it's going to be tens of billions of dollars in the potential retirees. And what's happened, and I can tell you because people call our office on this all the time, is that folks get a statement from Social Security say, if you retire at 62, 65, whatever it is, here's going to be your monthly Social Security benefit. And they may get a statement that says it's going to be $1,200, $1,600, $1,800, whatever it is. But that statement does not take into consideration this windfall elimination or government pension offset penalty.
Oh.
And so, look, here's what's happened. People have said, well, I've got this much in savings, I've got this much in an IRA or pension, and I've got this much coming in Social Security. So I can afford to retire. They go retire, all of a sudden, boom, Social Security benefits are only a quarter of what they thought they were going to be. They can't pay their mortgage. They can't afford health care, prescription drugs. They can't afford groceries or whatever it is. And so these people, oh my gosh, I just quit my job. They've already filled the position. 2 months later, I realize that I can't afford to be retired and I've got to go back to work. And so I've got to go find a job after making all of these massive decisions based upon information that you thought was accurate that your own government gave you, because no one told you that your government's going to steal from you or divert your retirement savings to artificially prop up Social Security trust funds. So our bill fixes this. It fixes it. It doesn't matter if you were a teacher in the public sector or in a public school, if you were a police officer, a firefighter, if you worked in parish or state government, but it fixes this. And it doesn't overcompensate. It treats you the same as anyone else. It treats you fairly for the years that you paid into Social Security.
So going back to your scenario, if you and I both paid 20 years, I would get what I am due, which if you were getting $1,600, I too should be getting $1,600.
You're right, but let me clarify. When you say get what you're due, but let's keep in mind, maybe you've been retired for 10 years. You're not going to get back that $1,000 a month that you should have been paid for all 10 years. But under our bill, which I think was more than generous concession, we just fix it prospectively. So your next check under that imaginary scenario we laid out, your next check would be $1,600, no longer just $600. So those 10 years where you gave up $12,000 a year, over 10 years, $120,000. Under our bill, we don't pay you back all that, which I would argue you are due. We only go prospectively, and the reason is just from a scoring perspective, the cost of doing all the retroactive payback would be more zeros than I can even imagine. And so we think that we're more than fair by just doing prospective fix.
Well, and I want to explain this. I remember when I first started reporting on it, it took me a minute to understand. Yeah. It's very complicated. I think how I understood it was when I went and interviewed the people. Yeah. I interviewed a husband who he worked in both the private and public sector, but his wife, who had nothing to do with anything, is also being penalized. Yeah. So talk to me about that. That's kind of where GPO comes in, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So
what is GPO?
So you have you have two different. One of them is that actually penalizes the actual worker, whoever, the teacher, the firefighter, what have you. The other one penalizes the spouse or the widow.
That's GPO.
And government pension offset. And so that one actually reduces the Social Security benefits of the spouse or the widow. And so, just when you think, my gosh, you're adding insult to injury under these scenarios. And so it is not limited to just the public worker. And so then when you start doing the math, you're like, well, my gosh, the retiree and then the spouse and then what other dependents are maybe there. So this ultimately, today it affects around 3 million retirees across the country. But that's the retirees and between WEP and GPO. But then you start thinking about the spouses or maybe other dependents that are, still needing assistance. This ends up being, and that's only current retirees. So then you think about prospective retirees. I mean, my gosh, we're talking tens of millions of people. And the worst part about it is, Kiran, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these people have absolutely no idea until they approach retirement or actually retire. Then they get this new calculation, or they may just receive a check that is a fraction of what they expected, or even worse. We've seen people that got the full amount for 2 years, only to have Social Security come back and say, you owe us $30,000. And these people are like,
wait, what?
Oh, you owe us $30,000 and your next check's going to be $1,000 a month less. I mean, just, oh my goodness. And so you can imagine the tears that people are calling us, when they call us. And last thing is this, look, you have all these lobbyists and all these, these high-paid people in Washington out there advocating for, their companies, their businesses, their clients, what have you. Look, these aren't people that can afford lobbyists. I mean, these are people that, like I said, police officers and firefighters, people that nobody out there is rich in these professions. And so, this isn't about, making somebody going from having $2 million to $10 million in assets or revenue. I mean, this is literally helping make ends meet in many cases. And so these are people that are well deserving, not just because they chose to be a police officer, teacher, or other public service opportunities, but because they really do deserve and need the money to make ends meet.
Well, they're already low-paying jobs to begin with, but nationally, I know on the law enforcement side and firefighter side, you already have a shortage of people don't want those jobs. It's too much risk, too little pay, but then this is a cherry on top.
Yeah. What kind of message is that from the government if you're saying, yes, you choose this job and you get penalized, you get discriminated against in your retirement?
So talk to us as far as what you're doing. Your bill, in fact, we just did a report on this. Your bill is one of the most co-sponsored bills ever.
So we have, there are over 10,000 bills that have been introduced in Congress. We currently have 325 out of 435 members of Congress. Today, it's the second most co-sponsored bill in Congress. And I think that we're actually going to become the most co-sponsored.
How many do you need?
All we need is actually 2 more.
Oh, you got that.
And I got a little inside track on some folks. So if I have to Photoshop incriminating photos, whatever I have to do. But seriously, I think we're going to get there. And so.
What does that say to you, though?
Well, look, it says that I've had hundreds of meetings with members of Congress, and Kiran, just like you indicated earlier, when you first look at this, it's hard to understand, and the reason is because it was hard for me to understand too, is because you're like. You understand it, but you're like, but that doesn't make sense. That can't be it. That can't be. Why would you penalize or discriminate against a police officer or a teacher? And so you try and rationalize it, but then after you actually understand it, you realize that your first impression was right. That irrational understanding was exactly right. And so we have had to sit down with, I'll say it again, literally hundreds of members of Congress and Republicans and Democrats from across the country, all 50 states. And walk them through this. Walk them through the imaginary scenarios. Show them actual statements. Show this is a real person, Jane. Let me show you what happens to her. Let me show you what happened when her husband died. Let me show you what happened to Jim whenever he retired. Here's the statement he got from Social Security. This is what he actually gets. He now is a Walmart greeter, and because he had to go back to work. And so they're powerful messages or stories out there. We had the Ways and Means Committee from Washington come down here and have a hearing. They had more testimony submitted from impacted people at that hearing, not just people who testified, but who submitted testimony telling their story than any other hearing that committee has had.
I remember that.
And so, it was amazing. They said, look, to print this hearing record is going to take a tree, per document or whatever. It was amazing, but it's because so many people have been impacted. But what's awesome, even though this was done over 40 years ago, we have just been slowly working and educating and informing people, and now we've gotten to the point to where we're at the most powerful position, the greatest support, the greatest acknowledgement or understanding of this issue than ever before. We have a group that we meet with on a regular basis, checking in. What are you hearing? What's going on? We need to get messaging out on this. We need, there's rumors about this. We've got to tap that down and make sure people understand accurately what's going on. And it's just been great. There's never been an effort like this. And people have been trying to fix this for 40 years. And let me say it again. We are at the best, the most powerful position we've ever been in. So which maybe I'm going to jump in front of you and so what's next? So we have been trying to negotiate for months now with the House Ways and Means Committee, and very amicable negotiations, but we couldn't get to a place that we thought was fair. And so what we're doing, because we said September is our deadline. If we don't have something by September, we're going to use this mechanism in the House rules that allows, and it's a very unique thing, if you can actually get 218, a majority of the members of the House of Representatives, to sign a document and say, we want to vote on this bill, which really, really rare that this ever happens, then it is forced to the floor for a vote. So it circumvents
no committees.
The committee, it circumvents the majority leader scheduling, and it just says this bill goes to the floor. So that is what we're doing, and I'm not doing it to go poke a finger in anybody's eye or cause animosity. We have been through very good faith negotiations, and I think they understand why we're doing this. They understand our timing because we've got to get our signatures in place. We've got to get this in the United States Senate. We've got to get to the president's desk, and our window's closing. I'm not going to give up or forego all the strong support that we've been able to build for this legislation over the past several months as we've had all our meetings and been able to gain all these co-sponsors.
What is the time frame that it could get to the House for?
So we're going to file the official paperwork, the little weedy documents that we need to do on September 10th. We immediately begin working signatures. In fact, we've been making phone calls and text messages and others and members of Congress to let them know this is coming, because I want to get those signatures as quickly as possible. So it is best case scenario. We actually have a vote on the bill by the end of this month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then we're working a concurrent effort in the United States Senate to continue building support, advocacy, and education over there. That way, we don't send it to the Senate and all of a sudden they're like, wait, what is this?
It dies there.
We want to make sure that we have people that understand it. And so we've been working an effort for the last few months over in the Senate, been building support, building education and awareness of this issue. And And I think we've got a real shot at getting this done by the end of the year.
Let's just say if it all goes through, when would it go in effect? If it's all signed, president signs off on it, everything's a done deal.
Yeah. Best case scenario would be in the first quarter of next year is when checks would start coming in with more zeros.
So I hate to even ask this. If this doesn't happen before you leave, is all your work wasted almost?
Kiran, I'd hate to look at it that way.
I don't mean education-wise.
Yeah.
I mean, would the bill just die?
You would have to start over again in January. Now, which obviously is bad news. You'd start over from scratch in January. So that's bad news. The good news is that, in that scenario, which I am hopeful we don't have to talk about, because we have so many members that we've educated, advocated, made them aware of this. I do think that the number of co-sponsors would run up even faster because we have done so much legwork on this bill this Congress. And I've got about a dozen members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, that we've kind of pulled in our inside circle on this bill, making sure that there's a good deep bench of people that really understand this issue, that understand, kind of the details and the intricacies. That way, one, it gives us a much bigger team of people to go out there to educate and advocate. But the other is that in the unlikely event that we actually have to start this thing over again in January, we've got a good, solid group of people that can hit the ground running.
That's good.
But let me say it again. I think anybody that's listening to this, anybody who's interested in this, we are in the sprint phase right now. And this is all hands on deck, education, advocacy, awareness. We have got to get to our 218 signatures as quickly as possible on this because as soon as we hit it, there's a clock that starts ticking, which allows us to go to the floor. So the sooner we hit it, the sooner that clock finishes ticking. We want it to finish ticking because you have to go through a number of legislative days. Then this bill is forced to the floor for the vote.
Well, and I know you're going to keep us updated on that. The last question I have for you when it comes to this is, where does Louisiana rank compared to the entire country on this? I know you said 3 million people just on WEP are impacted by it.
Actually, from WEP and GPO both. There are three. There are about 3 million current retirees, and so that doesn't count prospective retirees, and it doesn't count spouses and dependents and others. So millions and millions. Louisiana is about the third most impacted state. You have California in terms of percentage. You have California, Ohio, Colorado, Illinois. Those are and Louisiana are some of the most impacted states in the country.
Wow.
But Louisiana's top three in terms of percentage of impacted folks. So big deal for us here.
Well, keep us updated on that, and we appreciate, I'll tell you this, that being a reporter, every time we covered this story, and I can say this, I guess having worked on it for so long, I have a little bit of background on it to where we are able to report it and make sense of it. So every time we do report it, the public is so thankful, and so many of the comments are thank you. So I think I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of our constituents when I say thank you.
Oh, no, you bet. These people have shown incredible patience in 40 plus years of having their money diverted. It's been incredible, the patience they've shown, but also, look, what we saw at that hearing was just remarkable in regard to the strong support, the intimate knowledge of this, and just some of the absolutely tragic stories that we heard, personal stories we heard about people that had these awful scenarios where they were unable to care for loved ones, unable to actually retire, unable to keep their home. Literally, people selling their homes because they had retired and thought they had money to keep paying the mortgage. So just heartbreaking stories.
Wow. Let's switch subjects. Let's get to traffic. Talk to me about the advances you have made when it comes to traffic in and around the Baton Rouge area. Yeah, we all know that headache all too well. One crash on the new bridge, you're backed up to parishes in hours.
Yeah. So let's set the stage here. We have a traffic, or I guess I should say a infrastructure scenario in the capital region that is about 40 years behind where it should be. Okay, so the traffic that everybody in this community is unfortunately intimately aware of is a result of underinvestment, of poor investment decisions, of lack of prioritization, and in some cases, there are programs that invested billions of dollars in infrastructure in traffic solutions in Louisiana, and the Capital Region was left out. So this was a problem that has been building literally for decades. Now, I was hopeful under our last governor that they were really going to grab the bull by the horns. One of the reasons, and you brought up a bridge, for example, one of the reasons we haven't had a new bridge built in Baton Rouge area, is because it's expensive. I mean, that's the truth. Yeah. It's expensive. So if you're a governor and you go through and do a study and report and you say, okay, here's the solution. It's going to be a $2 billion bridge. $2 billion means that you're taking money from Shreveport, from Monroe, from Lafayette, from Lake Charles, from New Orleans, everywhere. And everybody else hears a giant sucking sound, and the money comes to Baton Rouge, and you build a bridge in the Capital Region. So governors have kicked this can down the road for decades now. And case in point, I think we had the eighth study looking at where a bridge should go was done under the previous administration. And to their credit, the John Bell Edwards administration actually did fully move forward with a study and came up with a conclusions, I guess. And to his credit, he did he attempted to dedicate initially $500 million down payment to the bridge, which is nothing to sneeze at. But it took them 7 years to narrow the bridge alignment to 32 options. 7 years. Look, to me, that's a filibuster. To me, that's I'm going to buy time and drop this in the lap of the next governor. And I think that was unfortunate. So let me say it again. They did move forward. They ultimately narrowed it down to 3 different options that connect White Castle and St. Gabriel area. Which if that's what the data shows, then I'm supportive of any project that data justifies the project. But if you build a bridge that far south, I think we have to build that bridge. But I think we also have to make some massive investments in the in the I-10 and in the 190 corridor, the old bridge corridor, because building a bridge that far south isn't going to do anything about the scenario that you laid out about a crash on the new bridge. You're still going to have those hours-long delays.
And then how do you get from St. Gabriel to I-12? I mean, that's a whole other subject. We'd be here for hours.
So bottom line is that, what we started working on from day one, we said, look, I don't know where this bridge is going to go, but I know that it's going to land on LA1 on the west side because LA1 parallels the river. I know that it's going to land on Nicholson or LA30 on the east side. So what we started doing is we said, look, no regrets right now, or they're trying to figure out where this bridge goes. Let's make some investments in Nicholson and LA30. Let's make some investments in LA1, including the new on-ramp, including we actually funded a new bridge. That next exit down is in Port Allen is the Lobdell 415 exit. It takes you up to 190. You can go to False River, the old bridge, whatever, if you go east. But going south, it goes to a truck stop and ends 1 block south because the intercoastal waterway's there. So what we did is we secured funds for a new bridge going over to the intercoastal. We as a result of some of the negotiations I did years ago on the BP oil spill settlement, there are dollars that are committed to not just that complement the bridge funds that we got, but it's actually going to build a new road 415 all the way down and connect back into LA1 to where you have 2 options to get to the interstate instead of just 1 today. So some massive improvements we've been able to get. We've secured funds for right-of-way, which is buying the real estate for the road, for the bridge. We've secured funds for the environmental work. We've secured funds to actually do engineering and design to begin construction on these things. We've got that. We've got the Terrace Street exit that we funded, which ultimately will allow for the reconfiguration of 2 full lanes whenever you're coming across the bridge, moving east and coming into Baton Rouge, not that funneling down to one lane, the only place in the United States. We've got the new exit at Piku that's being built today. We have the new lane on I-10 from Highland Road all the way down into Ascension Parish at Prairieville, Dutchtown, Geismar exit there. So look, billions and billions of dollars in additional funds have been put toward traffic solutions. We just secured funds to to do a better job with what they refer to as ITS, intelligent transportation systems, and I'll make it in the capital region, and I'll make it simple and just say that what that means is you're not going to be stopped at a red light, it turns green, and then you drive a block and there's another red light.
Oh.
You actually have smart computer managed traffic signals that maximize efficiency and don't just leave you sitting at red lights for no reason, but really improve the efficiency or flow of traffic. So all kinds of things we have going on, but I'll tell you, we've got 40 years of underinvestment and mismanagement to make up for.
And that's not going to happen overnight.
It's not, but I'll tell you, in the last few years, we have made some big jumps forward in regard to progress and solutions. And I'm worried that with these new congressional maps, you're not going to have a person, and I said this earlier, that grabs the baton and says, I'm going to get this bridge. Yeah. I am worried about that because the capital region its representation is too diluted. But I do think we need to push the governor and the State Highway Department, Department of Transportation Development to make this bridge a priority.
Let's move on to another big one, and this is a sensitive subject, the Comite River project, the Diversion Canal. Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, look, Kiran, the quick history, project came up in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It was projected to be $187 million. And you fast forward to when we came in office in January 2015, the very first month I was in office, we secured $7 million for this project. It had had a dry spell for years, not a penny put toward it. By the summer, we secured another $10 million. So just in 2015, in the very first year I was there, we went from a dry spell to getting $17 million in the bank, getting this project moving again. But most people don't realize this, but everywhere from St. Francisville south on the east side of the river, everything drains into Lake Maurepas, Lake Bourne, Lake Maurepas, Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Bourne, and out to the Gulf of Mexico. It doesn't go to the Mississippi River. The Comite project changes the plumbing. It takes the Comite River and the Amite River, and it takes that basin and connects it to the Mississippi River. And what that does is it takes a lot of the load off of the Amite and the Comite basin. And said another way, it gives it more drainage capacity, which is a huge deal. Now, I won't go into everything. We also funded a new outlet to allow the Amite River to drain faster. So a lot of things going on, but the Comite project is a 12-mile new river. There is nothing there today. Building an entirely new river that has the flow of the Arkansas River. We're talking upwards of 20,000 cubic feet per second of water capacity. So it connects to the Mississippi River. It gives you more capacity. It reduces flooding. And that project went from a $187 million estimate to about a $342 million project cost. Was the project estimate in 2018. And the Corps of Engineers, that represents about maybe 15 to 20% of the entire Corps of Engineer construction budget in a year. And despite that, we got $342 million. We got every penny of it, got it in the bank, and we said, all right, let's build this thing. And so that project started moving forward. Only to have the Corps of Engineers come back and say they needed another $125 million. Very frustrated by that, but we started working a parallel track, trying to understand the cost escalation, what was going on, where some of the failures had occurred, but we got the additional $125 million. Then Kiran had them come back to us and tell us that it was no longer 342 plus 125, which is 467, but it is now $974 million.
Why?
Not kidding. Because a number of things. One, they ended up having a railroad that ran parallel to the north-south road, and they had to take that railroad and turn it into a bridge. And the cost of building that railroad bridge where the new river was going to come under was more expensive than they projected. Ended up taking longer. We got involved in negotiations, ultimately got that negotiated, but it's still the bridge cost more. Number two, and the biggest component, there was an interstate gas pipeline that was built in the 1950s. Interstate, meaning connecting multiple states, high-pressure gas pipeline, that somehow no one knew was there. It crossed the project in 3 different places. The initial cost estimate of how much extra money it was going to cost to relocate that pipeline was $236 million.
Wow.
So we ended up jumping in negotiations, got Governor John Bel Edwards, got the head of the Corps of Engineers, and all kinds of others involved. Finally, we're able to at least agree to a path forward. One of the 3 crossings has been addressed. A second one is underway, and the third one is preliminarily moving forward. It'll be well short of the $236 million. In fact, probably just even less than $10 million. But that's underway. But it took major delays, and bottom line is that we have seen huge cost escalation on the project because of things like labor shortage, supply chain issues, and inflation. Because the federal government has put way too much money on the street, has been irresponsible in spending, weakened the dollar. And so those have been some major contributions to the cost. We're tracking some other things right now, but bottom line is, Kiran, today we have nearly $1 billion for this project that we've been able to secure. $1 billion. Project is well underway. You can go drive up Highway 61, 67, 19. You will see massive land moving operations. You will see what looks like a massive river that is being built. Bridges are being reconstructed or being built over this new waterway. And so incredible progress. But I'll tell you, project hadn't been managed well. The fact that it took, somebody just discovered an interstate gas pipeline in a project that's been sitting around for decades is inexcusable. So I'm very frustrated. It's taken a lot longer than it should have. It's more expensive than it should have. And we're looking at some big changes in this project because I just don't think it's been handled well, hadn't been managed well at all.
Do we have a potential completion date?
So I would have, a few months ago, I would have said that we're probably looking at 2026, which was probably about 4 years longer than it should have. 4 years longer than it should have. There are a few other potential complications we're tracking that we're just trying to better understand right now. If these are going to be additional setbacks or if they're just, kind of some repositioning issues. And so we're trying to kind of recalibrate right now and update that. But, say it a few months ago, I would have said sometime in 2026, probably second or third quarter. But I want to make sure I understand what some of these new developments are, or just some of these potential changes, and just figure out if these are really complications or if these are just minor issues.
So it could be potentially longer than 2026.
Look, their scenarios, they've never ceased to stop surprising me on this thing. I mean, really. And Kiran, as you know, this was, kind of the background that I had and brought to the table. I've built a lot of projects like this over the years, and just never seen anything just as mismanaged as this one has been, especially with the fact that you've had 4 decades to kind of really think about this and make sure that you knew every single thing there was to know, and put yourself in a scenario where you could execute this thing perfectly when the dollars came in. And look, I've been doing this a long time, in previous life, before this job, everything else. The major hurdle is getting the money. I mean, that's it. It's getting the money. You can design projects. You can find people who are really good and skilled at building them. Getting the money is a problem, especially when you're talking about $187 million. I read a story the other day how the state legislature just advocated $110 million for projects all across all 64 parishes, and for different initiatives. $187 million was the initial cost estimate on this, ballooned to $342, ballooned to $467, and now nearly $1 billion, and we've gotten every penny of it. Which is nearly tenfold the amount of money that the Louisiana legislature allocated to all 64 parishes for different programs. And so this is a ton of money. I'll say it again. Getting the money has always been the hardest part. And when we did that, we were popping champagne corks, so excited, and thought this thing was all downhill. And they have just thrown up every whack-a-mole type problem, scenario, and hurdle that you can imagine over the last few years. But I'll tell you that we're going to make sure that this project is on a solid trajectory before I leave, because we've got too much blood, sweat, and tears. And most importantly, this project really is a game changer for the plumbing of this region and should have happened decades ago.
When you look back at everything you have done in the last 10 years, what goes through your mind? And I don't mean that just as one of the people who represents Louisianians. I mean, even you're a father, you're a husband, you're a son. When your kids even look at you, your wife looks at you, what goes through your mind? Are you proud of what you've done? What would you say?
Look, I want to say this again. Have we batted 1,000? Have we been perfect? No. Would we put our record of success up against anybody else? I would. Do I think that, when I look back over the last, what will be 10 years, did we leave this place better than we found it? Yes. Did we make massive progress on some of the biggest challenges and priority in our community? Yes. And so look, it's been an honor. I have to be honest that there are a few things that I'd really love if we could have finished them, but I think we've left this place better than we found it. I think we've got some amazing projects on a great trajectory right now, and I'm proud of the work that our team, because it's a heck of a team, that our team has been able to achieve over the years that we've been had this amazing opportunity to represent this area. And Kiran, you've watched politics for a while, and you're in office for a while. You start developing enemies, and people get mad at you for this one thing that you did wrong, even though you did 100 things right. In our last election, we had Republicans, Democrats, Independents in the race. We had nearly a dozen parishes that we're representing, and we had almost 81% of the vote, which to me is that's sort of your grade, which was the highest in the state of Louisiana. And I couldn't be more proud of the team. I couldn't be more proud of the accomplishments that we've been able to achieve, and it's just been an honor representing this area.
It's okay to say you're proud of yourself too.
Well, it's been a team effort. It really has. I couldn't do this without the great group of people that we have working for the state in Louisiana, and we have in our Washington office. Couldn't do it without them. Great group of people that view this as mission work, that view this as home and a lot more than just a job.
I get that. It's never about you. It's everybody working together. Okay, last question. What's next?
I have absolutely no idea.
Are you scared? I mean,
there's a part of me that is. My wife and the bank have made it crystal clear that I got to pay the mortgage in January, and so there's a part of me that is, but there's also a part of me that's excited. There's a part of me that really, I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to. You get sucked up into this world of just absolute craziness. Washington is crazy. And there's a part of me that's really looking forward to just pulling back out and spending time with normal people again.
Your own family, too.
Yeah. I heard somebody else, these are borrowed words, who was leaving public office that said that they're no longer going to represent and serve the community, that they're going to serve their family. And
yes.
And I tell you that really it kind of twisted a knife in me, but it rung true because I know nobody has sympathy for folks in jobs like this, but this has been has been a huge sacrifice for the family. It really has. I'm leave town most weeks and out of town, and young family, and a lot of burden on them and on my wife, and they didn't sign up for this. But look, let me just go back. There's a part of me that's really looking forward to just getting out and resetting and refreshing, and I use the word detoxing a little bit, which is probably the one that's most appropriate.
Well, I have no doubt that whatever the next chapter is for you, it's going to be a great one, and I think this, Louisiana, a lot of Louisianians stand behind you because of all that you have done.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and to our listeners, we appreciate you joining us for this episode of Louisiana Unfiltered, and we will see you next time.